Hello and welcome to today's episode of Rawkode Live. I'm your host, David Flanagan, but you may know me as Rawkode. Go figure. Uh, we've got a really cool episode today. We're taking a look at a tool to help make your Kubernetes lives easier. Who doesn't want that, right? We're going to be taking a look at Lens from Mirantis. But before we do that, we've got a little bit of housekeeping. So, I say this every week. If you're not subscribed to the channel, now is the time to do so. Please subscribe and click that bell. You will get notifications for all new episodes of Rawkode Live. I'm going to do my best to produce materials that help us navigate this vast cloud-native landscape together, and I would appreciate you joining, engaging, chatting in the comments, and having some fun. We also have a Discord server. Feel free to join at rawkode.chat. There's nearly 500 of us in there now talking about all things cloud native and Kubernetes. So come and say hello, and I look forward to meeting you. Also, there are Rawkode membership packages from as low as 99 pence per month to support this channel. And also there is incubating and graduating levels. Incubating is for people that want to join us and do live courses and workshops. Currently, we are working through a course on InfluxDB2. We had an episode today where we explored the Flux language and how to query time series data. I want to thank Kevin, who signed up today for incubating level, and Noel, who has already been in there, and there's a few other of you. Remember to join the Discord and connect your YouTube account. All right, that is the housekeeping done. We are going to meet Edward from the Lens team at Mirantis. Hey man, how's it going?
It's going well, David. Thank you. Thank you for having me today. How are you?
Very well. Today has been a good day, and I'm excited to play with Lens. I always like it when I get a tool that I played with and I enjoy, and then get to learn more about it today. So this is going to be an awesome episode. Uh,
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
do you want to take a minute and just, for anyone who's not familiar with you and Mirantis and Lens, just give us a little bit of an introduction, please?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So first off, I want to thank you for having me here today and the audience. Hello, I'm Edward Ionel, and I'm part of the Mirantis team. I'm specifically on the product team, and I'm focused on open source technologies like Lens and K0s, which is a lightweight Kubernetes distro. And more of my day-to-day responsibilities is really seeking out the pain points within Kubernetes and other cloud native technologies to help and try to streamline developer and operator initiatives when working with these technologies. So that's my main focus. And Lens is something that I actually stumbled upon prior to even being a part of the Lens team while I was at Mirantis. And we acquired the Lens and the team of Lens back in August of last year. And I was using the tool before we even acquired them. And once we acquired them, I was begging to join the team actually. So this was something I wanted to do quite a lot, and this is how I got this cool little Lens hoodie, which people are able to get if they would like to join our Slack channel. I'm always giving away free hoodies. So again, David, thanks for having me. Looking forward to this wonderful session.
Awesome. Great introduction. Yeah, people get in the Slack channel, get yourself a hoodie because those are pretty sweet. All right. I believe you're going to start us off with some slides to talk about what Lens is and why people should be interested in it. And then we're going to do a hands-on demo. So do you want
Absolutely.
to get your screen up and we'll kick this thing off?
Sounds good. And let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, I see the Kubernetes IDE 5. All yours, Edward.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you, David. So, hello, everyone. I'm looking forward to this awesome session. And as David mentioned, we will be doing two things. One, we'll take a look at these slides. It's just an overview for us to get a better understanding of what Lens IDE, some of the features that are within the IDE, and why developers or operators should be utilizing this open source technology. From there, we'll transition into a live demo where we'll go through the key features as well as what a developer may use Lens for, an operator may use Lens for, an SRE may be using Lens for. And then after that, we'll actually take a look at something that's quite cool. And it was released with our newest release, which is Lens 5. We released that back in June of this year. And we'll be taking a look at how you can share access to a Kubernetes cluster securely through Lens spaces. So that's another exciting thing that we'll be taking a look at today. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. I know this is going to be a jam-packed session. And again, thank you all for joining us today. I'm quite excited about this one. So we can skip over this slide. We already talked about it, but again, responsible for growth and developer relations here at Mirantis. We'll skip through this slide. So I'm sure we all know this already, but I'll just touch on it a little bit. Kubernetes is quite challenging. People, organizations invest in Kubernetes and other cloud native technologies, but they may not be seeing that return on investment that they should when working with containers or Kubernetes. This is kind of where Lens comes in. Lens is a 100% open source technology that's a developer-friendly desktop application meant for all of your Kubernetes needs. It works with any certified Kubernetes distro, whether that is GKE, EKS, K0s, K3s, Minikube, and so forth. I did want to bring some stats up. These are roughly a month old or so, as you guys can, or 2 months old actually. But we are the self-proclaimed, and I like to mention that, we are the self-proclaimed world's most popular Kubernetes IDE. Currently on GitHub, we have 15,000 GitHub stargazers, which is a fantastic achievement from the team. And I do want to thank the community for this. We could not be at this pace and at this level of GitHub stargazers without the amazing cloud native ecosystem and the community that we're all within. We also have 250,000 users that are using the tool itself, and we have roughly 80,000 people using it daily. And we've seen over 160,000 different clusters in the last 30 days, and we always have some telemetry to be able to tell us what type of clusters people are using. So before moving on into the demo itself, we are going to take a look at the features at a glance. I'm going to talk to these slides. And I do want to mention that these are just some of the features that we will be presenting in the slide deck itself, but we'll be taking a look at many different things that you can do within Lens once you have that desktop application downloaded and installed on your operating system. Excellent. So the first one is a unified catalog. The unified catalog should be thought of as a cloud native directory. At least that's what I like to think of it as, where you can bring your clusters, your services, your workloads, tools that you may be using in one beautiful place, which makes it a directory. Users of Lens can actually very easily filter between these different resources and assign labels to these resources to really easily recall what type of resource that particular asset may be, whether it's a Kubernetes cluster or a new Lens space or a web link, and so forth. And we'll touch on some of these things actually in the demo itself. So that's the catalog. I think of it as a cloud native directory. The next thing are two very useful things to improve efficiency when working with Lens and Kubernetes, of course. So the first is the hotbar, which is going to be on the left-hand side of the Lens desktop application. And this should be thought of as like the main navigation of Lens. And what I use the hotbar for is to really create specific workflows within my environment, within Lens. So I can have different spaces, and spaces are collaborative spaces where you can add Kubernetes clusters to and share that with your team. Talk about that more in a second, where I can add my clusters to the hotbar itself. So I can easily navigate from cluster to cluster, regardless of the Kubernetes distro. And we have the command palette, which is another great resource to work much more efficiently within Lens. The command palette should be thought of as, or it is, keyboard shortcuts to perform specific actions, right? So for example, adding a cluster to Lens, viewing a specific pod when you're within a cluster. You can use a quick shortcut to be able to actually access this particular item or feature, whatever you may be doing, very, very quickly. So these are two things that help our users work much more efficiently when leveraging Kubernetes. It's the hotbar and it's the command palette. So this is actually one of my favorite features within Lens, and it's, I call it the pre-built-in Prometheus. Lens automagically, I used automagically. It's a new word I'm using, David. So, so Lens automagically allows you to leverage a pre-built-in Prometheus directly into your cluster, meaning I can very easily see how my cluster is performing in the last hour, from the CPU to the memory, the disk, and so forth. And I can also see the total nodes. the total capacity, the actual usage that I'm using. And that, again, is all in the last hour, and it's a very granular view. So we'll take a look at this in just a bit. The next thing, and this is actually probably my favorite feature within Lens because I find it to be the most useful, and this is the smart terminal. The smart terminal is quite important to our users and myself. And the reason for this is within Lens, you may be working with many different clusters, right? So I could be working with 5, 10, 15, even 30 different clusters and more. And I need to be able to always match to the correct Kubernetes cluster endpoint, right? That the API endpoint of that cluster. So when I switch from cluster to cluster, Lens automatically matches to the correct cluster API endpoint, which is so important, right? Because if I'm switching from cluster to cluster, I know that I'm connected to that correct Kubernetes endpoint when working with that cluster. So this is extremely useful when working with multiple Kubernetes clusters, maybe a production cluster, a development cluster, or even different distros. You can be assured that you are always in the correct cluster endpoint, right? That you're always matching to that correct cluster API version, which is extremely important. Another thing I want to mention is that Lens always automatically connects to the correct kubectl and Helm, sticking to that correct version within the terminal itself, which is a fantastic feature as well. And we'll take a look at these things in the demo. So the next one, another one of my favorite features, probably maybe 3 or 4 down the list when it comes to my favorite, but this is being able to deploy Helm charts very easily. So Lens has the ability to view thousands of publicly available made Helm charts, and you can manage these directly in your cluster, meaning I can deploy a Helm chart directly to my cluster in a matter of seconds, maybe, or in the matter of seconds with 1 or 2 different clicks. So this is extremely useful when viewing different Helm charts and trying to deploy them directly onto your cluster. And we will actually be doing that today as well. We'll take a look at some Helm charts, the Helm charts that are available. We'll install a Helm chart directly to our cluster. And depending on the Helm chart itself, we may even port forward into the application. Extensions. So this is my second favorite feature. And there's a couple reasons why. So extensions are plugins built directly on top of Lens. And the reason why this is so valuable is, let's say, for example, that I am a startup within the cloud native ecosystem, and I have built a product, tool, or service that is able to tell me vulnerabilities within a Kubernetes cluster. So that startup organization and so forth can build a plugin on top of Lens where they can leverage our users, or our users can leverage that technology to be able to very easily understand the vulnerabilities within that cluster itself, right? So it's twofold. One, our users get to leverage new technologies, and 2, our partners and the community and the ecosystem can leverage our users to get up and running very quickly if their product, service, open source technology is brand new, right? So currently we have over 100 different extensions built on top of Lens. Many of these, I do want to mention, are not publicly available, but we do have 10 or 15 different publicly available extensions made for the community. Some are built by Team Lens, and others are built by awesome partner technologies and companies like Aqua Security, Kubernetes, KubeCost, and so forth. So we'll take a look at some of these extensions as well towards the end of the hands-on demo. And lastly, spaces. I touched on this just slightly when we were taking a look at the unified catalog. And spaces should be thought of as a centralized cloud-based offering on top of Lens. Really what it allows our users to do is build collaborative spaces where you can add specific Kubernetes clusters to that space, and then you can invite a teammate member or a colleague to that space, and they will be able to have specific access to whatever's within that space. Currently, it only works for, Kubernetes clusters, but we do have some exciting different things we will be releasing in the roadmap and in the future. So that's important to keep in mind. But long story short, Lens Spaces allows Kubernetes cluster admins to share access to their Kubernetes cluster securely. Well, excellent. We took a look at many different features already, from the unified catalog, the hotbar, the command palette, the pre-built in Prometheus, deploying Helm charts, extensions, and of course, Lens Spaces. From here, I think we're actually going to transition directly into the demo itself, where we'll take a look at Lens, how to get started, some of the cool features in action. And then if we have time towards the end, we actually will share a Kubernetes cluster with David today. And it should be an exciting session. So once again, I want to thank you, David, for having me and the audience with us today. I'm looking forward to this demo, and hopefully nothing breaks. You know, in live sessions that can happen, but I have a feeling it won't happen to us today. So without further ado, let's jump directly into the hands-on demo, where we'll be taking a look at Lens, the Kubernetes IDE.
I don't want to worry you, Edward, but I mean, I just look at clusters and they break. I'm just saying.
Yes, and they do break, and let's hope nothing breaks now. I've been taking a look at some of my clusters. So everyone, this is Lens. Whoops. This is Lens here, and David, you still can see my screen, correct?
We can, yeah.
Excellent. So this is Lens. When you're first brought into Lens, you're actually brought into that catalog screen that we talked about that cloud native directory where you can bring different tools, clusters, web links, spaces to be able to very easily filter and manage all your different cloud native resources. Currently, there's only a couple things supported, and I do want to mention that the catalog was released back in June of this year. But we do plan on releasing many other resources that can fit within the catalog, like specific automations and tools that our users can leverage. Right now, we have our spaces. And again, that's that centralized cloud-based offering that allows us to share access to Kubernetes clusters securely. We have our web links within our catalog as well. Anything can be added here. So one of the things I like to do, since I'm not the most advanced Kubernetes user, I'm not a novice either, but I like to have like a kubectl cheat sheet. So you guys can see that here. And just since we're talking about it real quick, if I click this icon here in the hotbar, I'm immediately brought up to this Kubernetes cheat sheet, right? Which is quite powerful. And this one's built by Mirantis, but there's many others that I leverage as well within the ecosystem. And there's some fantastic ones built by many different companies and developers and so forth. So I like to utilize a cheat sheet depending on the activity that I'm doing. And again, those are the web links. Then we have our clusters within our catalog as well. All of these different clusters. And we can see within the source column, we can see that some of these clusters are local and some are attached to Lens Spaces. We'll talk about the clusters that are attached to Lens Spaces a little bit more in just a moment. From here, what I really want to do is actually begin taking a look at the true functionality behind Lens. The catalog is fantastic when trying to access different resources, but the true power behind Lens is the full situational awareness that you get when working with Kubernetes clusters. So on the left-hand side, we can see my hotbar here. I have a K0s cluster. We don't see any Prometheus here as of right now. And the reason for this is I have not checked the box to have the pre-built-in Prometheus launch on this cluster, but we will do this. Then I have my Minikube cluster, right? Where that's when you can actually see the pre-built-in Prometheus. We can see how it's performing in the last hour, from the CPU to the memory, the total capacity, the number of pods. And here at the bottom of this overview screen, we can always see real-time events that are pushed to us as a user, right? So we can see if there's any problems, if we need to debug an object and so forth, right here in this spot. Then we also have our GKE cluster. Again, it's missing the Prometheus configuration, which is absolutely fine. We will actually install it and push it directly onto our cluster in just a moment. And then here, I do want to mention that this is a demo cluster built by some of our team members here at Mirantis, and this cluster is shared with me. So this is not my cluster. I did not add it to Lens itself. This is just a cluster that's shared with me through Lens Spaces, which is quite cool. That being said, let's actually take a look at how you can add a cluster to Lens. So if you navigate to your catalog, click clusters, there will be a plus icon here. In this plus icon, there's two ways to add a cluster. Only really one way for the user to do it, but Lens actually automatically searches for a kubeconfig file on your operating system, and it will add that cluster directly to Lens without you having to do anything once you hit that plus icon, of course. Or you can copy the kubeconfig file directly into this, let's call it a terminal, and you can add the clusters. So those are the two ways to add clusters directly to Lens. Going back to my K0's cluster, let's actually jump into the settings here. Right-clicking on the hotbar icon will bring us to our settings. And we have several different functions that we can perform. So the first thing is we can always give it a name, which for this demonstration, I'm just calling it what it is, which is a K0S cluster. And we can give it an icon. And the reason why this is awesome, and we touched on this a little bit in the slide deck, but it's that efficiency aspect, right? Being able to navigate from cluster to cluster very easily just by an icon. So as we can see this is a K0, we can see this is the Minikube logo, and here's a GKE cluster as well. Going back to our settings, we are actually going to drop down to the Lens metrics, and we're going to add the metrics directly to our cluster by doggling these doggles here. We'll click apply, and this is where something may break. Let's hope not, but I'm sure it's going to be fine. We have multiple different Kubernetes clusters here already, so even if something did happen, which I highly doubt it will, but even if something did, we can always switch to a different cluster, right? And then take a look at all of the features from that cluster itself. So let's just close this here, go to nodes, and let's see if it begins to actually add the pre-built-in Prometheus slowly but surely. It may take a while to do this since it's actually installing it. So it did not want to do it. Let's see what's going on here. Maybe if we come back to it in just a second, let's see. We'll go to settings one more time. Let's just take a look at what's happening. We have auto detect, yes. And then Lens metrics, they're doggled, okay. Generally, I think this takes a couple minutes to do, which is absolutely fine. But from here, we'll just jump into our Minikube cluster. Now within our Minikube cluster, we do have that pre-built-in Prometheus directly pushed to our cluster. And as mentioned, we can see how it's performing in the last hour. On the bottom, this plus icon, you can do two very cool functions. You can open up a terminal session, which is that smart terminal that we mentioned already, where it automatically matches to the correct cluster endpoint. So if I write kubectl git nodes, you can see the version, right? kubectl version, you can see the git version. And if I switch to my K0's cluster, and there's the Prometheus as we can see. So it just took a couple minutes to do, right? If we switch to my K0's cluster, we can see it's connecting to the correct endpoint. And we can see it's a different git version, right? So whenever we're navigating to a new cluster, it's automatically doing this on its own. So we are reducing user error here when switching from cluster to cluster, and you can see it's different for our GKE cluster as well. So that's the smart terminal, and it's extremely important to note that Lens, and we'll be taking a look at this in a moment, but Lens is always leveraging your role-based access control from your kubeconfig file. So if you do not have the correct permissions from your kubeconfig file, there's particular functions and things that you may want to do to your cluster that you will be unable to do. So let's move on from here. We have our nodes. Again, we can view our nodes, how they're performing in the last hour from the CPU to the memory, the disk, the pods, and so forth. And we get all of the details associated to this particular object, right? So we have our labels, we have the operating system, we have the OS image, we have the kernel version, we have the container runtime, the kubelet version, and of course the capacity and all of the pods that are associated to this node as well, right? Which is extremely useful for one, debugging, or just trying to navigate through your cluster very easily without having to write any kubectl, right? So I know many developers that like to take this route, or even operators, SREs that like to take this route, because it's going to save them a lot of time instead of always having to write within the CLI different command lines and so forth. So if I chose to do so, I can actually click into one of these pods. And again, we're given a granular view of how that particular pod is performing in the last hour with all of the details necessary again. From here, I do want to highlight some of the functions that you can perform within Lens as well, again, based off of your RBAC, right? We're always leveraging your RBAC for your Kubernetes cluster. So we can shell into the node, we can cordon the node, we can drain the node, and of course we can edit this resource, right? If we choose to do so, hitting that pencil icon. We can begin configuring, debugging, and making changes here if we choose to do so, which is quite awesome. So we'll close this again. And of course, we can delete it, which is something I don't want to do for all honesty. But that is something we can do as well. From here, we'll transition to our workloads, and we get an overview screen here as well. You can see your pods, your deployments, your stateful sets, and so forth. And I want to mention that these green color code that we see is good. So typically, if something was wrong with our cluster or within one of these objects, whether it's a pod, a deployment, and so forth, we'll actually have different color codes throughout this sphere. So we can have maybe running would say 12, and then it would say warning message 1, for example, on the pods. Currently, we do not have any of those, which is fantastic. I know this cluster is performing fine. And on the bottom here, and this is actually one of my favorite extensions ever built, and it's built by one of our developers here at Mirantis and Team Lens specifically. And this is something we'll take a look at in just a bit as well when we get to the extensions side. But this is a beautiful extension that allows us to see how all of our Kubernetes resources and objects are related to one another, right? So zooming in, we can see our Prometheus, everything that it's associated with, and then of course we can get details into this config map, the namespace, and so forth. And then clicking on it gives us that granular view again of that object, deployment pod, whatever it may be, right?
Yeah, that resource topology map is pretty sweet. I like that.
It's awesome, right? And you know what's so cool about it too is when you're working with a massive cluster, right? I mean, this is a smaller cluster, but when you're working with a massive cluster and being able to see how everything's connected and with all the objects and resources, it's absolutely awesome. So yeah, I love this one as well. It's actually my favorite currently made available extension, and I leverage it all the time. So from here, we'll click into pods. There's several ways to do so. You can do it from the overview screen, or you can click pods here, and it immediately gives us this beautiful user interface where we can filter very quickly. So again, if this is a massive cluster with, let's say, 50 to 100 different pods, for example, we can very easily navigate based off of the filters here. I do want to mention these filters are very similar to like Excel, for example, or Google Sheets, where if you have a filter going, so if I'm going to filter by default namespaces, this will actually follow us everywhere throughout Lens. So it's very important to notice and know this is happening. When I first was using Lens, I swear to you guys, I had it filtered for one of these different namespaces, and I thought I was going insane searching for other deployments and pods and so forth because it was filtered down by the namespace. So I do want to mention that you do need to uncheck the filter as you navigate through Lens. It's quite important to mention. Again, you can also search for specific pods here. You can view the status and so forth. And the reason why, again, this is so valuable is if you have a massive cluster, you have to perform various different command lines to view all of your objects within your cluster. So I just ran a quick command line, and now we can see all of the different objects within our cluster, right? Very easily when they were created, when they're running. But then again, if you want to view a specific object, you would have to run another command line to access that object as well, right? Compared to with Lens, I can just click directly into this controller. I can view the metrics immediately of this pod, see how it's performing, again, from CPU, memory, network, etc. And then again, I have various different functions that I can perform as well. Like I can shell into the pod, I can view the logs, which is a fantastic resource. You can search through the logs. You can actually download the logs as well. You can share them with a colleague, for example, and so forth, right? And again, you can edit that resource directly within Lens, right? And that's what makes it that IDE, is being able to edit these resources. One thing I do want to showcase before moving on is the ability to create a resource directly into our cluster here. So when I click this icon, we actually have some cool templates that you can leverage right off the bat. So we can do a deployment. This will deploy an Nginx deployment directly into Lens, as you guys can see. And I can create it and close it, and it immediately deploys this resource directly into our deployments. I've deployed this already, so that's why you can see the date is 4 days ago. And the neat thing about Lens is we really do leverage Kubernetes to scale our different workloads and our deployments, right? So I'm using the user interface here to actually scale this deployment up. So I can scale it up to, like, let's say 30. And if I jump to my pods, we begin creating all of these different containers, right? All in real time. And of course, this is Kubernetes doing this, right? But we're just using the user interface without having to write any command line to scale this up, which I think is quite valuable. So that's a very neat feature as well. And if I jump back to my deployments, I'll grab this Nginx. It's still processing. And here's that resource map that we can see that's going crazy right now. But these are all those deployments, and they're the same deployment and so forth. Very cool. And again, we see all of the details associated to this deployment. I'm going to scale this back down. My machine is screaming at me right now. So we'll scale it back down. And if we scroll down, we begin terminating these containers, right? All in real time.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, this is really cool, right? And being able to navigate through pods, deployments, daemon sets, stateful sets, all like that. Like, that's probably 80% of what I need to do. But what about custom resources? Does Lens understand custom resources and allow me to interact with those with the same kind of nice visual UI?
Absolutely, yes. So we do have custom resources here. I don't have any added to my cluster, but you absolutely can bring in, like, for example, like Istio or something along the lines of that directly to your cluster. So I don't have any on this cluster, but yes, to answer your question, you can.
Okay. We also have a question from the chat if you want that just now, or do you want to wait?
Sure. What is it?
Russell is asking, what filtering does a log view have? Can I use a regex to search?
One more time. I'm sorry, I missed that, David.
Russell wants to know, from the log viewer on the pods, do we have the ability to filter those logs, and can I use regular expressions to filter that if needed?
I believe so, yes. I do believe so. Let's take a look here. Maybe not, but I believe you can, actually.
I think maybe the search at the top right.
Yep, there it is. Yep.
So if you type tools, does that? Okay, so it's like a highlight kind of search. Got it. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Awesome. Let's close this. And so as you guys saw, we just deployed a resource directly into our cluster as well, which was that Nginx deployment. We scaled that up, leveraging Lens. So a couple of things we've taken a look at already, right? That multi-cluster management tool, right? Switching from cluster to cluster while always maintaining the correct Kubernetes endpoint, extremely important when working with many different clusters. We took a look at the pre-built-in Prometheus that allows us to understand how our cluster is performing in the last hour, from the CPU to the memory, the nodes, the pods, the capacity. And here we have a warning message, as I talked about earlier. So if I open this up, it's going to give us details on this particular object, which is a pod. And scrolling down, we can see the events and the warning message here, right? So this is going to help us debug, troubleshoot, and so forth within this particular object. Then we can, of course, view the logs and go from there. We also took a look at accessing various different objects, one object to the other. We deployed a resource. We looked at the Prometheus. And from here, we're going to transition into actually taking a look at the Helm charts, the extensions, and then we will also create a new space, add a cluster to that space, share that space with David, and he'll be able to see that cluster as well. So from here, to be able to access your Helm charts, or down in this app section, you click charts, and then it'll immediately start bringing up all of the charts and the repos it's associated to. So I do want to mention that my current Lens desktop application, the way it's set up is I'm only going after certain repos, as you guys can see here. And to change this, I believe you go to preferences. Let's see. Yes. And then here within this Helm chart section, you can add a custom Helm repo, or you can add, from the thousands of repos that are publicly made available here, right? I only use certain ones. So I use Mirantis, I use Bitnami, I use Stable, and that's really it. This Cloudflare one, I don't even think I use, so I can remove that. And then we can navigate back to our applications or our Helm charts, and we can search for particular Helm charts as well, right? So if I want to deploy a WordPress Helm chart, you click here, it's immediately going to give me all details associated to this chart itself, right? Who's maintaining it, where it lives, keywords it's associated with, and of course, how to get started with this Helm chart if you even chose to do this on your own, right? Without deploying it through Lens. Like you can do it through the terminal or a command line and so forth. Scrolling back up, we're going to install this Helm chart. Let's actually close this pod stuff out. And this usually takes a couple minutes as well, just as we did with the Prometheus that we saw on the K0s cluster. Some details. You can make some changes here if you chose to do so. We'll click install. And it's been installed to our cluster. So several ways to access it. You can view the release here. And we can see all of the resources that were created for this Helm chart, the service accounts, the secrets, the config map, and so forth, right? So that's very awesome to see. Another thing I want to point out is actually the ability to port forward directly into this application. So this should work fine, I imagine. Just a second. So if I chose to port forward into it, it's taking longer than usual.
Yeah, I was wondering if that delay was normal or if it was just having a wee spinny problem to itself there.
Yeah, it's not normal actually. I wonder if my computer is just going crazy.
Still recovering from those dirty pods you spun up, I think.
Yeah, exactly. The Minikube cluster, it doesn't like it. So let's give it one more try. Let's see if we can get into this port. Come on. Definitely the longest it's taken. That's fine. Let's actually, this won't work. I doubt it. Yeah, but unfortunately, it's not working here, everybody. Part of the live demo, right? But you can port forward directly into the application also via Lens. What you would do is you go to services. Oh, that's why.
I don't think it's got any endpoints yet.
Yeah, exactly. And so forth. So anyways, that is port forwarding, and that is installing a Helm chart directly to our cluster.
Are the pods running yet?
Let's take a look. So we have some problems. Unbound, immediate persistent volume claims. Yeah. So we're having some problems here, as you guys can see, and then we get that message that's directly built into Lens as well. Scrolling down, we can see a little bit more about it. 0 to 1 nodes are available. One pod has unbound, immediate persistent volume claims. So again, if you chose to troubleshoot this, you have the ability to do so relatively quickly. And I think this is another reason why we weren't able to port forward. But that being said, let's not troubleshoot this right now. There it goes. But it doesn't work because, as David mentioned, there's no endpoint currently.
You should be able to port forward to that Nginx one, though, if you want to do that instead.
Let's give that a shot. Yeah, let's go to deployments. But actually, we'll go to services. Whoops. Where did you go?
It's just okay. It's just a deployment. There's no service for it.
Yeah, that's what it seems exactly. It's still trying to open after I clicked all of those things. That's funny. Excellent. So we talked a little bit about Helm charts, but now let's take a look at our. Oh, we had a crash, guys.
That'll be the last time you spin up 30 pods on your own machine.
Yeah, exactly, and in a live demo as well. So we're gonna get away from this Minikube cluster for now. We'll go back to my K0s cluster and stay away from that. So now let's talk about extensions, and currently have one extension added to this Kubernetes cluster, which is the resource map. To add extensions, very simple. You click Lens on the top and left side, click extensions, and you would install the extensions that are available. To publicly available, or you can bring your own as well. So here are some extensions that are publicly available. We have Mirantis Container Cloud extension, which allows you to connect your MCC infra and your Mirantis Kubernetes engine cluster directly to Lens without actually having to add that kubeconfig file or have Lens search for it on your operating system. You have the Starboard extension by Aqua Security. This is an amazing extension that shows you vulnerabilities within your cluster and you have several different fun ones as well. One of the funnest ones, but I haven't used in a long time. Yeah, I said funnest, but is Space Invaders. You can actually kill pods through this game. I don't know if it's been updated in a while, so it may not work, but let's actually grab it and download it and see if we can spin this up in our cluster. Again, I haven't used this in a while, and I know we don't really maintain this one. It was more of an experiment. So going here, we can search for it, look for our downloads. Let's just grab the name, Lens app, okay. Oh, remember, there it is, Space Invaders. And then it will begin installing to our desktop application. You can see it was successfully installed, and we get a status that it's incompatible. So it has not been updated in quite some time. So I'm going to uninstall this, but we'll take a look at that resource map that is already installed directly to our desktop application, which is something we took a look at earlier. So I'll just touch on this just one more time here, since we talked about it already. But here's our Kubernetes resource manifest, which will show us how all of our objects and resources are connected to one another. And of course, you can get the details, and you can hover over them and view them. And then again, you can click directly into them, right? And get that much more granular view of that particular resource. So the stateful set, Prometheus, the CPU, all the way to the file system, right? And of course, we can jump into this resource and make some configuration changes as well. So many things we've covered already. And the last thing I really want to try to get into this demo is Lens Spaces, which is our newest feature and release brought to Lens. And it's actually a very, very cool release. Again, it's a centralized cloud-based offering that allows cluster admins the ability to create these secure spaces that allows you to share access to a Kubernetes cluster. So you're not giving anybody access to your kubeconfig. You're actually just giving them access to their cluster. And initially, it's just like a read only, right? And then you would actually have to change the role bindings and the roles within that cluster and that kubeconfig file to give them further access. So for example, if I wanted to give developers access to a Kubernetes cluster, maybe they want to view logs of a microservice or something along these lines, they can do so once you make a little bit of changes to the kubeconfig. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a space. I'll click this plus icon. We're going to call it Rawkode. Good name. Not create space. I know why. It's because I have too many spaces. Let's go to my profile, spaces. We can leave that one. And we'll leave this one as well. Okay, now let's create a new space. Good. Could not create space.
Is it because my username is Rawkode?
No, I don't think so. Let's try. I think it has to do with how many spaces and clusters I've shared. Let's try IoT. Wow. Maybe it does have something to do with your username. I'm going to have to take that back to the team and see exactly what happened here, because that is a little bit alarming. Anyways, now that we've created our space, what we can do is we can actually add our cluster directly to this space. So if I take this Minikube cluster, I can share it. And we can share it to this IoT space. Here, what we need to do is we actually need to install Cluster Connect directly to our cluster. This creates an end-to-end encrypted tunneling between the cluster and the API itself. So clicking here, install cluster and share. So we've added that to our cluster. Now what I actually have to do is I need to invite David to this space, and then he'll be able to see the space and have some access to that Kubernetes cluster. Again, it's read-only initially. You would have to alter the role binding and the RBAC to be able to actually give him further access to that cluster itself. So it's quite secure. So
we have a question on that in the chat if you're happy to.
Sure.
So Russell asking, is the authentication mechanism using RBAC or something else entirely? So I think what Russell is asking there is, when we install Cluster Connect, is it creating an RBAC, a role and a service account?
It is.
Okay.
It is, yes, it absolutely is. So now we'll click, this is you, correct, David? I believe it is. We'll add
yes,
you.
it is me. It's me.
And we'll click share cluster. So I've sent you the invite. And what I will do now is I will actually stop sharing. And if you can begin sharing Lens and your screen, and we can go from there.
Done.
So jumping back, stop sharing. I almost clicked hang up. That was a close one.
Wouldn't be the first time.
I can see your screen. You said it wouldn't be the first time?
Yeah, I've been hung up on before, and not intentionally, of course. But
that's funny. So from here, what you'll have to do actually is you'll navigate to the Rawkode on the bottom right, your username, and you'll click My Profile. And here you'll click Spaces, and then you should see an invitation to that space. Once you accept that invitation, you can navigate back to your catalog, where that space now lives in that directory that we mentioned. And just clicking that X icon at the top right will allow you to do so.
It created a default space with my username. So I think that explains why.
That's what happened. That is what happened. Yes. That is what happened. And then catalog, exactly. And there you can see those clusters, right? The lens space cluster from here. And it looks like it added your own clusters already to Lens. At least that's what it looks like. So clicking that, and then you can click to open that big MI button on the left.
Oh, right.
Yep. And then it's going to begin opening that cluster itself directly to your Lens desktop application. Remember, guys, it's only read access initially, so he will not be able to perform specific functions. That's why he doesn't see the Prometheus. Let's see if you can even take a look at the nodes. I'm curious. It does show you. But if he tried to do any admin functions here, like drain the node or shell into the pod or something along these lines.
You feeling brave?
So. Try it.
Drats.
Well, excellent. So as you guys can see, we share the space with David and added that cluster to that space. And now he had access to that cluster itself, which is so cool. Yeah, he can view some of the resources, some of the pods, some of the objects here, but he won't be able to perform anything that can scare us. See if you can view the logs, David. On the top right.
Yeah.
There it is. Yep, one over. Yep. I don't think so.
That may not have any, I guess.
Or that could be the case. Yeah. What are we looking at? WordPress.
It looks like your WordPress is finally happy.
Now?
I think
Earlier it didn't want to be, huh? Excellent.
Yeah, hold on. Let's see.
Let's see. I'm curious. It's the spinning wheel of death. When that happens on my MacBook, I want to cry sometimes.
Yeah, maybe I don't have permissions to set up a port forward.
Exactly. I am actually releasing a blog where I have a guide on how to give new permissions directly to a user that wants it for their specific space. Oh, you can do some logs.
Yeah, so Nginx didn't have any logs, but the WordPress app definitely does seem to have some. So there we go. That's cool. So this is your local cluster on your own machine that you're sharing to me via Lens Spaces.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And again, that's done by Cluster Connect, which is an end-to-end encryption that creates that tunneling that we talked about already. What kind of technology is the tunnel using? Something like WireGuard? That's actually an excellent question, the Fireflash. I don't have that answer for you right now, and I apologize for that. I do know it's a Damien set, but I do not know exactly what the technology is itself. But you can access the open source technology, which is called BoardD. It's created by Team Lens, and you can actually spin this up on your own. So it doesn't have to be used for Lens Spaces. So I know that doesn't answer your question, and I apologize for that, but you can access BoardD and just grab it and be able to actually create this similar experience without Lens Spaces.
I tried to edit your service, but I got permission denied. So
Good.
I like that. Lens Spaces is pretty nice. That was it was seamless. Just opening it up, joining it, and then now I'm poking around like a very curious rabbit, but very nice.
Yeah. And this is something that I think many of us may have troubles with, whether you're a cluster admin or a developer needing access to a kubeconfig file, because we're never giving you access to the kubeconfig file, right? You're getting access to that space, and based off of the RBAC and the role bindings, you can give them further access to that cluster. Which is super, super useful. And again, as mentioned, I am releasing a blog either today or tomorrow. It'll be on my Medium channel and on Team Lens, where I actually have a guide on how to give the correct role bindings, let's say for a developer that wants to access a kubelet namespace or something along these lines, or a default namespace, or whatever the namespace may be, and a specific team. So one thing we didn't take a look at here is I just added you as a member, but you can actually create a team within that space, and then that team will be given specific permissions based, again, off that role binding that we would do to the kubeconfig file itself. So you're just a member right now, but if I created a team for developers and then I added that particular command line and that snippet, that code itself, I can easily give you specific access to namespaces and so forth, whatever functions you're trying to perform to that cluster. So we're seeing many users leveraging this for, let's say, for example, viewing logs of microservices or applications and so forth, right? So extremely useful. And I think we all know how challenging sharing access to a Kubernetes cluster may be. Firewalls, VPNs, air gap tunneling, all these different parameters that we need to jump through in the hoops. So this is why we develop Lens Spaces, because we're hoping that it actually helps our users and the cloud native ecosystem.
Nice. Very, very cool. I like this a lot. So
awesome.
Well, it looks like we got a comment, maybe from someone on your team, Ty Martin.
I've never met Ty Martin, no. So, but that's agent sponsors as an outbound connection to the Spaces service, which works as a secure proxy. That is correct. Yes.
There we go. Thank you, Ty.
Is there a favorite place to search for extensions? Absolutely, Daniel. So the best way to access extensions is actually what I showcased. So if you just go to the Lens application, go to that extensions icon, it will link you directly to all of the publicly made available extensions that Team Lens has vetted of being safe. First live. We have another question by Russell. I'll take a look at this. Can Lens compare clusters? Example, a Teams test versus live clusters to highlight differences. No, I do not believe we can do that. No, but that's actually really good feedback. And I'm going to take note of this if you guys don't mind. Because that's actually super interesting. Thanks for pointing that out, Russell. But no, we can't do that as of right now. Because first live clusters, highlight differences. That's actually a super good idea. And Ty, I also want to thank you for jumping in and answering that question for me. I really do appreciate that. Thank you.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for taking time out of your day and joining us and showing us all the features of Lens. I think we can all agree it's a pretty impressive tool. I think the extension thing is awesome, and I'd love to see what people come up with there. There must be so many random ideas bouncing around in people's heads, and I can't wait to see them. So.
Yes, agreed. For example, KubeCost has a great one, which will tell you how much you're spending on your Kubernetes clusters, right? It'll break it down for you and so forth. I mean, similar to what some of these public cloud offerings do for us, right? But it's very, very cool. It's directly intertwined with Lens, and there's many different extensions. So I agree with you. That's super awesome. One thing I did want to do, the last thing, David, if you don't mind, is just share a screen with our contact information where people can find us. If they have any questions for me, if they have questions for the team, if they want to join the Slack channel, if they want to receive a hoodie as well. So
yeah, go for it.
Awesome. So I'll share my screen one more time, everybody. I know we're at an hour now. And last thing, here's where you can find Lens. You can also download it from our website. There's my email at Mirantis. Here's a Lens email. And join our Slack community, and feel free to ping me. Just ping me on Slack or ask questions on Slack. All of our team members are there, and some of the really core developers and contributors to the open source project are there answering questions day after day. And if you're interested in a hoodie, depending on where you are in the world, I'm more than happy to send you guys some cool hoodies and swag. We want everybody to feel extremely welcome to the community because, again, we could not be where we are today without the amazing cloud native ecosystem. So thank you all again. And David, thank you.
All right, I will definitely drop those links into the show notes as well and the description, so I'll make it easy for everyone to click, get some information, and get a hoodie. All right.
Excellent.
Well, thank you again. Really cool product. Great seeing that start to finish. Everyone go check it out. Let me know how you get on. Join the Discord, and I'll speak to you all soon. Edward, thanks again. Have a great day, okay?
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.